Hello there. So I'm Megan, and I was asked to make a video on the geology of Middlesex County, New Jersey about 6 months ago. So this is that video. If you're curious about Bergen County, New Jersey's geology, then that's in my previous video, just so you know. So a lot of my material for this video was either sourced from primary literature or this kind of skeletal outline of Middlesex County geology. They have these little booklets available in PDF form online that you can check out. Some of the terminology is a little bit outdated. They still use like quaternary and tertiary, but and they also, I think, still use the New Brunswick Formation rather than the Passaic Formation. But otherwise, most of the material in this book is basically pretty much current, up-to-date information. So I definitely recommend checking this out if you just kind of want a general overview. So to kind of talk about where I'm going with this presentation. So the first part of this video presentation thing will basically be cool things you can do if you're in Middlesex County and you like geology. And then the second part of this video will be the actual geology part. So you can skip ahead if you don't want to find out some cool things you can do in Middlesex County that are geology related. So yeah. So the first thing you can do is that if you live in Middlesex County, you literally have a museum right in your backyard. The Rutgers State Museum is here, and they often host a lot of different events. So they'll have open houses where they invite a lot of geologists who have like PhDs and specialize in different fields of geology. And they come and speak at the open houses. And you also have the actual faculty department, and they have educators. So I definitely recommend checking this place out and maybe looking on their site to see what events they're hosting at any given point in time if you really like geology, because it's a good place for hobbyists to kind of go. So yeah. Then you also have the New York, New Jersey. It used to be called New York, New Jersey. Now it's just New Jersey for some reason, Fossil Gem Show. Historically, this is housed in like April or March. But this year, because of COVID, they had to cancel it. So they have a new date, which is in August. So you can actually go 2 weeks from now. And it's in Edison, which I'm pretty sure is also in Middlesex County. So that's another thing you can do. So with that out of the way, now I'll be talking about the actual geology part. So just as a little bit of background, we skipped the majority of the geological history of planet Earth because of the fact that Middlesex County does not really have any fossils other than bedrock ones that are older than the Mesozoic. So because of that, you don't have any like real, like Precambrian geology or anything like that, or Devonian or something. So for the most part, it's Mesozoic and Cenozoic. So if you are looking to find hallucigenia in Middlesex County, sorry, you have to be disappointed. So the Mesozoic rocks, I'm not going to read all of this just because of the fact that a lot of this is consistent with what I talked about in the Bergen County video. But basically the Mesozoic is very similar to the Mesozoic of Bergen County, at least from the Triassic and the Jurassic. Now, the Cretaceous is a different story. So basically you'll have like a lot of rocks that can be fossil bearing that are sedimentary from the Newark Basin kind of area that often preserve trackways and things like that. So I think a few trackways have been found from this time period in Middlesex County. I could be wrong about that. I mean, I have on the slide that it says no fossils have been found, so maybe not. But for the most part, like there hasn't been too much Mesozoic, like Triassic, Jurassic activity in any papers I've seen talking about Middlesex County. So just keep that in mind. But that doesn't mean that there isn't any. It just means that they haven't really been studied, if they do exist, because we do have the right rocks for it. It's just, I don't think that anyone's really studied it. So the rocks that we do find that are sedimentary basically tell the story of Pangaea and its climate. So Pangaea, from what we can tell using these rocks, was a very strange place climatically, where you'd have like these periods of dry and then periods of wet, and it would just be desert and then like monsoon. So because of that, you have rocks that are like full of like lakes and streams, and you have rocks that are also just completely dry up. So obviously a lot of the trackways were deposited when things were wet so that there's actual mud to walk on and not during the dry periods. So yeah, so here are some pictures of the different formations that you can find, or rocks from those formations that you can find. These are just examples. Usually they're sedimentary rocks that kind of have a reddish color. Usually you can kind of go off of that to tell whether something's from the Newark Basin if you're in that general area. Not all the time, but it's usually a pretty good guess. So next up, we have a part that's a little bit unique from other parts of New Jersey, like Bergen County. So during the Mesozoic, the northern part of New Jersey was getting uplifted. So it was going up, and then the southern part was getting depressed. There was a brief period before that where everything was flat, but then this kind of process began, and it continued. And so most of the rocks that we have, most of the formations that we have, were kind of deposited and signal in Middlesex County specifically, kind of the process of New Jersey sinking. So we do have rocks from the Cretaceous that were deposited that were terrestrial. And this is usually part of the Raritan Formation, which was like at least semi-terrestrial, where you actually can find amber. And so I have pictures of that on the next slide. But beyond that, you also have like a lot of different sediments that are showing being part of the sea floor, and it'll just, it progressively rises and falls. So when Southern Jersey was getting depressed, it wasn't a totally linear process. There were times when it would be higher up, and there'd be times where it was further like down underwater. And so because of that, scientists can kind of read based on the types of rocks that are found, how shallow the oceans were at any given point and how kind of depressed the South was. So, oh yes, we've also found dinosaur footprints. So just as a note, in the Raritan Formation specifically, but no skeletons. So here is pictures of amber from the Raritan Formation. So this is probably the most interesting rock formation, at least in my opinion, in Middlesex County, and it's also one of the most intensively studied. So here you can find amber with inclusions. Inclusions are basically anything you can find that's not just the amber itself. So an example would be a fossil, but you could also have, for example, soot if there was a fire. In the Raritan Formation, we have not found soot, which suggests that there was not a lot of like fire activity going on, and that the majority of the sap was the result of insects boring into wood and then having the wood release the sap in response, because that's like an immune response trees have. And then, so that's why a lot of the fossils preserved are insects that are encased in amber. But this is actually known about for like 200 years or something like that. But people weren't really intensively studying the inclusions until the 1900s, when there was a discovery. There were a couple of discoveries that kind of kicked off a little bit more interest. And I'm sure that Jurassic Park definitely helped with the interest of amber as well. So you can still find a lot of amber as a byproduct of clay mining, as a side note, which is something that's still done in Middlesex County. Not as often as it was historically, but it's still something that's quite established in Middlesex County. So here's another example of a fossil you can find in the Raritan Formation. So this is actually aquatic rather than an amber, and it's an ammonite. So those were the little spiral things that were in the ocean during the time of the dinosaurs, before the time of the dinosaurs as well. So yeah, they're kind of cool. And then here's a picture of some Raritan Formation rocks. So since there's never really been a dinosaur discovered, but the rocks are sort of Cretaceous aged, you could be the one to discover the first actual skeletal materials of a dinosaur from Middlesex County. So yeah, go grab your shovels and your marsh picks and do it. Yeah. And then we have the Cenozoic. So kind of everything that was happening in the Cretaceous where South Jersey was sinking kind of just continued in the Cenozoic as well, up until you kind of get to more recent times when we started to have glaciers and ice sheets. And the evidence we have of this ice sheet in Middlesex County is basically a bunch of different random associated rocks that have kind of been deposited because a giant ice sheet was on top of all of North America, and the end of that ice sheet kind of fell smack dab on like the New York, New Jersey area. And when that happens, it basically forms what's called a terminal moraine. So I actually have a picture of this on the next picture. I mean, on the next slide, excuse me. So basically, the way that a glacier works is it has like ice, but it also has water, and the water and the ice will kind of move. progressively depending on like how cold it is and kind of gravity and all that. So because of that, there will actually be like a flow to a glacier that'll pick up rocks, because water is very good at eroding things and ice is very, very good at eroding things. A lot of times in geology textbooks, you'll have like the picture of water going into the cracks and then in the winter freezing. So kind of like a similar process allows glaciers, in addition to the fact that they're like super heavy, to erode rock and basically pick it up and move along with the rock. And so because of that, at the end of a glacier sheet, you'll get like a bunch of debris. And so we actually have a lot of that debris, and that's kind of stuff that you'll be able to find in the dirt of Middlesex County. So I think that's about all that I really had to talk about. So I hope that this video was enlightening, and that I guess if you have any requests for other videos, you can ask me. But yeah,